There is a photograph. It was taken in a hotel room in Cancun, Mexico. In the photograph, a woman is lying on a bed. She is smiling. She is not wearing any clothes. And she is covered, head to toe, in $100 bills. $20,000 in cash, spread across her body like a blanket, like a statement, like a celebration. The money was not hers. It belonged to her husband. Her husband, who had been shot through a pillow in his own home 6 months earlier, while she was busy arranging her alibi. That photograph was entered into evidence at her murder trial in 1994. A juror named Nick Catran Whitney looked at it and said, "And I want you to hear exactly how he said it. You're rolling in all this money, Nude. Give me a break." That picture did more damage to her than anything else. The jury sentenced her to death, and her name is Mary Ellen Samuels. They called her the Green Widow. And this, all of this, is only the beginning of her story. Part 1. The Perfect California Girl. Mary Ellen Gurnick was born in 1947 in Santa Ana, California. Sun-drenched, post-war Southern California, where everyone was building something new and the future felt limitless. She grew up what people in that era called an all-American girl. Pretty, social, charming. The kind of girl who knew exactly how to make people like her, and exactly how to use it. She met Robert Bob Samuels when they were both teenagers in Santa Ana. Bob had been infatuated with Mary Ellen since they first laid eyes on each other. He was the kind of man who loved completely and trusted absolutely, a quality that, in the wrong hands, is not a gift but a vulnerability. Bob Samuels grew up to become something genuinely impressive. He worked his way into the Hollywood film industry as a camera operator, a skilled, demanding physical job that required technical mastery and the ability to work alongside some of the most talented directors in the world. His credits read like a greatest hits list of 1980s Hollywood, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Short Circuit, The Color Purple, Heaven Can Wait, Lethal Weapon. Bob Samuels was not a famous name. He was something more valuable. He was the trusted professional behind the camera, the man who made the famous names look good. His colleagues described him as quiet, diligent, and thoroughly decent. "He's not a player," said his friend Geary McLeod. "He was a hard-working guy." He married Mary Ellen. They had a daughter, Nicole, and for a while, just for a while, it must have looked like everything was going to be fine. It wasn't. Part 2. Worth more dead than alive. By 1986, the marriage was over in everything but paperwork. On October 31st, 1986, Halloween, Mary Ellen filed for divorce. What followed was 3 years of separation, failed reconciliation attempts, and a slow-burning financial reality that Mary Ellen began to calculate with the precision of an accountant. Here was the math. If the divorce went through, Mary Ellen would receive a settlement of approximately $30,000. The house, the business interests, divided as the courts decided. $30,000. But if Bob died while they were still legally married, she would inherit everything. The house in Northridge, the Subway sandwich shop franchise they co-owned, his car, his savings, his life insurance policies, the total over $500,000, $500,000. Prosecutors would later stand in front of a jury and say 5 words that explained everything. He was worth more dead. Mary Ellen Samuels had done the arithmetic, and somewhere in 1988, in the bars she frequented, in the conversations she had with people she barely knew, in the casual, almost cheerful way she discussed what she was planning, she decided to act on it. She began looking for someone to kill her husband. Here is something that will stop you completely. Mary Ellen Samuels did not whisper her murder plans. She did not meet with intermediaries in dark corners. She did not use coded language or encrypted messages. She asked people at bars, in public, out loud. She just didn't seem to care who heard her soliciting his murder, said prosecutor Jan Morizzi. She approached at least one man who later became an anonymous tipster. He refused. He signed off his tip to police with a poem. A rose is a rose, but the nose always knows, so that detectives could identify him if he called again. She approached others. Some laughed, some walked away. Some were interested. One of them said yes. His name was James Bernstein. He was 27 years old. By day, he clerked at an electronics store. By night, he dealt narcotics and carried a business card that listed his occupation simply as specialist. James Bernstein was also engaged to Nicole Samuels, Mary Ellen's own daughter. Mary Ellen told Bernstein that Bob had abused Nicole, that he was a child molester and a batterer, and that he deserved what was coming. Whether any of that was true has never been established. What is established is that it worked. Bernstein told his employer he wanted Bob Samuels taken care of permanently. His employer gave him a phone number. The number belonged to a man named Mike Silver. Silver would be the muscle. Bernstein would be the coordinator. Mary Ellen would be the architect. The plan was set. December 8th, 1988, and the night before the murder, Mary Ellen Samuels called Bob's answering machine. She left a casual message about dropping off the family dog that weekend. She left another. And another. Evidence. Carefully manufactured. The grieving ex-wife, just trying to arrange a routine handoff. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual. On December 7th, 1988, she told her friend Anne Hambley that Bob Samuels was already dead. His body hadn't been found yet. She told Anne she was planning to discover it in 2 days. On December 8th, 1988, James Bernstein and Mike Silver entered Bob Samuels's home in Northridge through a door that had not been forced. Bob was found in the hallway, half naked. He had been struck over the head with the barrel of a 16-gauge shotgun. Then the gun was pressed against his skull, with a pillow between the barrel and his head to muffle the shot, and fired once at close range. He died instantly. Nothing was taken. Not his wallet, sitting in plain sight. Not his electronics. Not his cash. Because this was never a robbery. On December 9th, 1988, Mary Ellen Samuels and Nicole drove to Bob's house. They let themselves in with a key. They moved through the house, rearranging things to suggest a struggle. And then Mary Ellen called the fire department and reported finding a body. When the police arrived, Mary Ellen met them at the front door. She was wearing a low-cut dress. During questioning at the police station, she flirted with the officers. At one point, she reached over and placed her hand on a detective's bald head and remarked on how she liked bald men. Prosecutor Jan Maurizi later said, "She sat there and she flirted with the detectives like it was a cocktail party. Her husband had been dead for less than 24 hours. The inheritance moved fast. Within days of Bob's death, Mary Ellen and Nicole moved back into Bob's Northridge home. She took his car. She cashed $6,000 in unclaimed payroll checks from his film work. And she sold the Subway franchise for $70,000. She refinanced the house for $160,000. She collected more than $240,000 from his life insurance policies. Total collected over $500,000. And then she spent it. Not carefully, not quietly, not in the way someone who had just lost a husband might spend money, with grief and restraint, and at least the appearance of mourning. She spent it like someone who had been waiting their whole life to finally have it. Fur coats, designer clothes, custom outfits from a boutique called Trashy Lingerie, stretch limousines for bar-hopping nights across Los Angeles, private cocaine parties with hired male strippers. 4 months after Bob's murder, she threw herself a lavish birthday party at the Knollwood Country Club. She bought a new boyfriend a Porsche, in cash. She purchased a condominium in Cancun, Mexico, and she acquired a new car of her own, with a personalized license plate. The plate read NASTVXN, Nasty Vixen. She was driving around Los Angeles in a car with a plate that read Nasty Vixen, 6 months after arranging the murder of her husband, while investigators were still working the case. And she trained a parrot, a talking parrot, to curse at the lead detective on the case whenever he came to her door. You cannot make this up. The anonymous call. The investigation into Bob Samuels's murder had gone cold. 5 months in, detectives had leads that all dried up. A jealous husband who turned out to have an airtight alibi. A contentious tax dispute that led nowhere. And then on May 1st, 1989, a phone rang at the LAPD. The anonymous caller said he knew a lot about the Robert Samuels case. He said Mary Ellen had approached him about killing her husband. He had refused. Then he gave them a name, James Bernstein. He signed off with his poem. A rose is a rose, but the nose always knows. Detectives looked up James Bernstein's record. Minor drug offences, nothing major. But his name kept coming up. And when they started pulling the threads around Bob's social circle, around Mary Ellen's bar crowd, around Nicole's friends, Bernstein's name appeared again and again. Investigators brought both Mary Ellen and Bernstein in for questioning on the same night. Mary Ellen held the line. Smooth, composed, unwavering. Bernstein cracked almost immediately. They put the two of them in the same room. Bernstein looked at her and said, "He's going to arrest one of us or both of us, right here, right now, tonight, for the murder." Neither confessed. They were released. 4 weeks later, a couple driving along a remote mountain road in Ventura County found a body in the undergrowth. It was badly decomposed. The fingerprints identified it as James Bernstein. James Bernstein had seen what was coming. In late May and early June of 1989, he had started talking. He told his friend Rennie Goldberg he was remorseful and terrified. He told his brother on June 26th that he was the only person who could burn Mary Ellen. He told his boss at the electronics store he was going to the police. His boss told investigators. He called me up and said, I'm just going to tell the police what I know. That's the last time I talked to him. Mary Ellen Samuels, from her Cancun condominium, had already been told what Bernstein was planning, and she had already hired 2 men to make sure he never got the chance. Their names were Paul Edwin Goll and Darrell Ray Edwards. They convinced Bernstein to join them for what they described as a drug rip-off road trip. They drove him out to an isolated dirt road. Edwards wrapped his arm around Bernstein's neck from the back seat. Bernstein fought. He broke free. He opened the car door. He ran. The 2 men chased him down, tackled him, and strangled him. It took 5 minutes. They dumped his body down the embankment and drove home. Anne Hambley, Mary Ellen's friend, called Cancun with a coded message. It was safe to come back. When investigators finally started pulling the full picture together, what they found was extraordinary in its audacity. The anonymous tips from bar patrons who had heard Mary Ellen openly soliciting Bob's murder. The testimony of Anne Hambley, who confirmed Mary Ellen had told her about the murder before the body was found. Nicole Samuels' friend David Navarro, who received a call from Nicole on December 8th, the day of the murder, saying simply, "It's done." The financial records, $500,000 spent at warp speed on fur coats, Porsches, cocaine parties, and a Cancun condo. And the photograph. The photograph from the Cancun hotel room. Mary Ellen, on a hotel bed, no clothes, smiling directly at the camera, her entire body covered in $20,000 in $100 bills. Blood money, and displayed like a trophy. The photograph had been taken by a lover. The lover thought it was a private moment. The LAPD thought it was a confession. When the jury saw it, juror Nick Catran Whitney said later, "That picture did more damage to her than anything else. You're rolling in all this money, nude. Give me a break." Mary Ellen Samuels was arrested on January 26, 1990, 2 years and 7 weeks after Bob's murder. She was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, multiple murder, and murder for financial gain. The trial that followed was unlike almost anything California had seen. The evidence was overwhelming, extensive, vivid, graphic, and damning. But it was also, by any measure, spectacular. There was testimony about lurid love letters, about male strippers at private cocaine parties, about mother-daughter photos submitted as evidence, about botched murder attempts that preceded the successful one, about a talking parrot trained to insult the lead detective, about a license plate reading Nasty Vixen. There was a daughter, Nicole, who had been engaged to the hitman her mother had hired, and then had that hitman killed. There was an anonymous informant who signed his tips with poetry. And there was the photograph. Always the photograph. On September 16th, 1994, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty. On both counts of first-degree murder. Then they deliberated on penalty. They came back with a recommendation of death. Mary Ellen Samuels became the fifth woman to be sentenced to death in California since the state had resumed capital punishment. Judge Michael R. Hoff looked at her and said the evidence against her had been overwhelming, extensive, vivid, graphic, and most compelling. He said she had planned the murders for a long time and had the ability to convince others to do her dirty work. He said she had involved many people, even her own teenage daughter and her daughter's friends. He sentenced her to die. Mary Ellen Samuels appealed her conviction. The U.S. District Court for the Central District of California reversed her death sentence in 2005, finding that her trial lawyer had provided ineffective representation when he failed to object to the admission of evidence about her drug use and behavior. A new penalty phase was held. The jury again recommended death. As of 2026, Mary Ellen Samuels, now 78 years old, remains at the Central California Women's Facility. Her CDCR number is W54370. Her status in the prison system lists a single word where her parole eligibility date should be: condemned. She has given no interviews. She has sold no story. She told the probation officer before sentencing only one thing: that she wanted the court to know that despite being called the Green Widow, she had never sold her story to the tabloids. That was the one thing she wanted people to know. Not that she was innocent, not that she was remorseful, not that she was sorry, just that she hadn't taken the tabloid money. The woman who killed for money, who posed naked on money, wanted credit for the money she hadn't taken. And Bob Samuels? Robert Bob Samuels worked on Beverly Hills Cop 2. He worked on The Color Purple. He worked on Lethal Weapon. He went to work behind a camera every day and helped make things that made people feel something. He was described by everyone who knew him as quiet, decent, and hardworking. He was in the middle of a painful divorce. He was depressed. He had been estranged from the woman he had loved since they were teenagers. He had no idea she had been trying to kill him for 2 years. His sister Susan Conroy stood outside the courtroom after the verdict and said this: "Why did she do it? For the love of money." Then she said her brother still is missed very much by his family, his friends, and his profession. He was 40 years old when he died. He deserved better than a pillow pressed against his skull in his own hallway. He deserved to grow old. If this story left you with your jaw on the floor, good. Because this case is one of the most audacious, brazen, and frankly unbelievable true crime stories in California history. The murder for hire, the hitman killed by hitmen, the Cancun condo, the fur coats, the Porsche, the parrot, the license plate, the photograph. Share this video. Because Bob Samuels deserves to be remembered for more than the way he died. And because Mary Ellen Samuels, sitting in a California prison right now at 78 years old, should never be forgotten either. This is Peak Crime Stories. Subscribe for a new investigation every week. Leave your reaction to this case in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think of the photograph. Rest easy, Bob.